Good morning, Susana. How you doing today?
I'm good, Jamie. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you again so much for being on the podcast and just being open to having a conversation about all things personal, professional, kind of this journey that we're on. And I think really just opening up the conversation to how do we create mission aligned villages, right? How do we bring people around us that really amplify support and can join us on this journey? So that's the premise. I'm going to allow you because I know you have titles in the moment.
I
And
do.
so I'm going to let you do your introduction so that you can do it in the right order and in the right
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So I have two titles right now, unfortunately. But the my real job or my normal job is the housing Boulder County Housing and Human Services Deputy Director. And in that role, I support our director. We're the largest department in Boulder County. We have over 500 staff, and
Wow.
we have seven main divisions that really live within our department. So it's all human services based, and really excited for that work. But my second time, I'm currently serving as the interim executive director of the Boulder County Housing Authority. We are a mid-sized housing authority. We issue about a little under 1,000 vouchers a year that we're managing. We've recently developed several LIHTC properties, so we have about seven LIHTC properties that we manage.
Very
And
nice.
yeah,
Congratulations.
so the Housing Authority is about a $40 million organization. So in addition to my very large role as the deputy director, I'm also overseeing the Housing Authority. So it's good work. I love housing, and I'm having a lot of fun.
Awesome. Awesome. So we've known each other for quite some time. So you want to share, I guess, whatever you're comfortable sharing, kind of who you are personally. So we'll talk kind of a little bit who you are personally, who you are professionally, and your journey, to kind of get to this space, right? I think sometimes when at least for me, I know, in my mind when I was in my 20s, I kind of had this idea
Yeah,
what this was going to look like.
yeah.
Then I had a family, I got married, I had kids, they had their own lives. And it's kind of melded into this super fun journey, but definitely not what I thought it was going to be. And still trying to keep the balance of like what I intend to happen with what I need to do for the people around me to also thrive. Like it's been a very interesting journey, and I'm just curious kind of what that's looked like for you.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's actually a question I get a lot being in such a higher leadership level within Boulder County. People ask me all the time, like, how did you get here? Like, how did you land this position? So it's something I've been able to reflect on a bit. And I guess it's interesting. I am always been a really hard worker and a very busy person. So I'm one of those people that thrives in chaos.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but it has served me well, or at least I learned that early on so that I could use at least leverage it across my both personal life and professional life. I got married really young. We were 18, and we had the odds stacked against us for sure. And people would tell us that, literally tell us that all the time.
Oh my
But
gosh.
we've been married for 21 years now, so we beat the odds. But throughout that, I mean, there's a few things that as I look back on my life, like I went and got my master's degree right away. Like that was something that I knew I had to do. If I took a break, I probably would never go back. So I was really committed to that. So I got my master's degree by the time I was 24, and I had just had my first child, and so it was like perfect. Like I finished it and I had a baby and I was like, oh, I'm done. And then I had another baby and I had another baby and back to back to back. And, I actually remember my mom telling me this after my third in a row pregnancy. She said, well, I don't know why you got your master's degree. You'll never use it now because you have all these kids. And that was super hurtful, right, in the
Ouch.
moment. But I know. But as you reflect on that and you think about our parents' journey to, to their professional development was so different than mine. And times have changed, right? So, but in my mom's experience, as she started her family and had kids, her own career opportunities shrank. So I vowed to not let that happen to me, right? So that wasn't going to be my story. And I'm happy to say I have five kids now. That's the second biggest question I get. How do you do with so many kids?
Yeah.
Well, I don't do it alone is my answer. And,
Right.
I have an incredible partner, but I also have my mom and sisters and brothers, and everybody sort of has helped us over the years. But yeah, my life is chaotic at home and at work with five very, very active children, but nothing I would change. Um, and so I, in between all that, worked really hard. So yes, I would have kids and I would work sometimes, most times, two jobs. Not only because we had bills to pay, but also because I'm just a really hard worker and it's just like the nature of me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always worked in government. Like I always felt comfortable in that space. I think my dad worked in government, so it was something that was sort of modeled for me. And
Yeah.
I do like the ability to give back to people. And at my core value is helping people. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's always been a driver for me. So I've worked in workforce, I've worked in housing, my first job was working for Family and Child Services as a caseworker.
Right.
My favorite job and what really started getting me thinking about my future was working in the community. So being really rooted and listening to people and learning how to elevate their voices, not
Mm.
just being a
Mm.
worker that clocks in and, does good work, but actually really listening and taking their thoughts and hopes and wishes to people who could really make change and connecting that to elected officials, decision makers within the community, and literally bringing them together. That was like a tipping point for me to really learn the importance of leadership, of
Mm-hmm.
being at the table, of taking my position of being third generation Mexican American, and being able to articulate the needs of our community. That was a real shift for me. That probably happened in 2017, so it wasn't that long ago.
Okay. Okay.
Took me a little bit to get there. And then so in that time though, I was joining boards because that felt right. Like I needed to be at the table. So I started to serve on some nonprofit boards. And that was really great, learning some executive leadership skills that I wasn't getting at work. I had to find those myself.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I had people that were along the way investing in me and coaching me and mentoring me.
Mm.
And I just kept meeting new people that would open new doors for me. And
Yeah.
it's so funny because, you always say networking is so important, building social capital is so important. But that's my single biggest advice to like new graduates is like you really need to build relationships and
Mm-hmm.
leverage them. You
Yeah.
create that network. If people say call me, call them. If people say let's go to lunch with them, right? So many doors were open that way for me. And back in 2020, just before the pandemic, my whole life really changed. I was recruited to go work at a housing authority. And previously to that, I never worked in housing.
Okay.
And thankfully, the leader at that time I just was like, you're the person to do this. So come
Mm-hmm.
on in. And he showed me everything about housing, like everything, which was great. So it was a smaller housing authority, but I got to learn all the ins and outs, the development side, the financial side, the HUD side, the maintenance side, everything. I got to do everything. And that was really attractive to me because one, it's very chaotic and there's crises
Right.
that happen all the time in housing. So
Oh
that
yeah.
was really attractive to me. And it was different and challenging. And I
Mm.
was like a sponge. So I just took it all in.
Yeah.
So fast forward within that same organization, I went through like three promotions pretty quickly. I was basically serving as their chief of staff by the time it was over. I had bought in millions of dollars through some foundation funds and grant writing and using those connections that I was learning to leverage and just really beefing up my knowledge on housing. And so then that was
Yeah.
it. I saw this incredible opportunity in Boulder County, and it's sort of, it's funny to look back and say, just 4 years ago, I didn't even work in housing, and now I'm running a $40 million organization. So.
That's amazing. And I think you hit on something that I think is so important. And it's funny because as I was listening to you kind of list the different roles that you've had, the one that you didn't mention was educator, right? I remember
Mm,
when you
that was a big one. 10
um,
years.
I know. But I think that's what makes you truly the embodiment of servant leadership, right? People
Yeah.
forget about the servant piece and the
Yeah.
educator role that you have to forefront in servant leadership, right? You have to be willing to be a student, right? You have to be willing to get outside of your comfort zone and go seek knowledge of the people that you will be serving, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just kind of a talking head, right? Could you still have success? Absolutely. But it's not servant leadership. And that role, I remember seeing you in that role as an educator, and I was always so just impressed, envious with a good, right? Like, man, she does it
Mhm.
so well. She's so caring and thoughtful.
Mhm.
Um, and so I really appreciate you hitting on that point around how important it is to keep talking to the folks that you're
Yeah.
leading, right? And I think you I've always seen you lead with an educator's mindset, both as a
Yeah.
student and a learner, and as somebody who really enjoys teaching and like making it make sense to others.
Yes, thank you for reminding me that. Yeah, so it's interesting as I look back on all those years I taught for 10 years at various community colleges, which is the best place to teach because you get just this gambit of students, right? And I can honestly sit back and say I've learned more from those students than I ever could teach them.
Oh, I
And
know.
that's like the
Yeah.
coolest thing, right? Like I still today share stories from students that I had 15 years ago. I mean, they really made such an impression on me. And I can't tell you how many students I hired myself at my own organizations that I, still communicate with today, that I've encouraged to join boards. I mean, that was like a true point for me, a connecting point of the power of our students, especially in the community
Hmm.
um, college space, because there's so
Hmm.
many just different levels of experience there, and my colleagues too. I mean, that was some of the greatest years of my life teaching at colleges.
So kind of weaving back into a bit of the personal space, right? You talked about all of the roles that all the different kind of hats you wear. So like in any given week, right? What are the different hats that you wear? What are the different roles that you play, both personal and professional, right? Because I think we give a lot of weight, and I love it, right, to the board work, to the networking work, to the being in the community work. At the same time, right, there's a degree, at least for me, right? I play lunch lady every
Yeah.
6:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And there's something really special in that, right? I appreciate it, I enjoy it. I also realize it takes a different, kind of, it's still time management, but it definitely has a different, I don't know, it just has a different weight, and it's something that I think is very seasonal, right? Right now I wear so many different hats. So I'm curious, for somebody like you, what are the different hats that you play, or
Ugh,
what are the
they're
different hats
all
that you
over.
wear?
It's all over, and it's like such a joke. Like this afternoon, for example, the lieutenant governor is visiting one of our properties, so I'll be interfacing with her.
Yeah.
But later in the week, I'm delivering, cake pops to my kiddos' summit party because she's, going to Disney for her cheer competition stuff. But same thing. Like there's weeks that this happens to me. Like I'll be volunteering at concessions, right, for one of my
Yeah.
son's sporting events, and you meet the other moms and they're like, oh, what do you do? And you tell them and they're like, why are you here? Like, how do you have time for this? And it's just about what's important to you. So
Mhm. Yeah.
still super important for me to be involved in my kid's life. And that's something that I think has been really meaningful to me, especially working at some place like Boulder County where they give you a lot of space to have a personal lifestyle and they're encouraging of that.
Right.
So being able to control my own schedule and not asking permission to leave work, right? Because they want us to be
Yeah.
able, they want to trust us, and vice versa. But it's like a joke at work. Sometimes I'll say, well, there's days you'll see me vacuuming the floor because it needs to get done, and
Right.
it's just something.
Exactly.
I'm not one of those people that's like, well, you better call somebody. No, I mean, if it needs to happen, it needs to happen. And so, I'll be vacuuming the floor before the lieutenant governor walks in the door, and that's just how it goes some
Yeah.
days.
Absolutely. So and I'll kind of share personally, right? I've had to come to a place where I'm good with understanding that there's going to be seasonality in my journey, right? what I could do 5 years ago from an energy perspective, a time perspective, a professional perspective, I can't do in this season, right? It doesn't work, to your point about what's important and kind of how much time you can give to the variety of things, right? So, what I was able to do 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, I don't have today. And it took me a lot of soul searching to be like, Jamie, it's a season, right? Like just enjoy, try to have peace and happiness and joy in the season that you're in. I'm
Mhm.
grateful that I've found that place, but it didn't come without some really kind of introspective reflection. Was that natural for you, or did you also have to kind of walk that path for yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of dealing with that a little bit now, where I know that I need to slow down in my life. And a lot of that I think is driven by my family, like my kids,
Mhm.
for example. I know your kids are a little younger than mine, Jamie, but my kids, I have three teenagers right now and one coming right up. So it's so interesting because people kind of warned me about this, but as they become teenagers, they need you
Need
like
you.
they needed you when they were 3 and 4 years old. Like it's very interesting. So they have sort of forced me to slow down. Like if I don't go to an event, they are upset with me. Or
Yes.
if I'm not bringing them lunch on their break because they have, a long day of practice, they expect me to deliver them lunch. And so I can't not do that anymore. Like I see them, like sad and
Yeah.
upset about it. So they have naturally slowed me down in that sense where it's like,
Awesome.
and they get really right now they're into like being time bound, like they don't want to be late. And it was easier when they were younger because I'm like, just blame me. And now they're older, so now they're like, but I can't be late. So now I'm
Mhm.
trying to meet them where they're at, and they're right. We should be on time. And so I've had to slow down. And I think too, a piece of that comes some confidence, right? Like over the years, 5 years ago, I would not have said no. Like if I needed to be
Right.
somewhere,
Yeah.
it's on my calendar, I'm gonna be there. Now I can say, you know what? I'm not gonna make this today.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if that I think was a level of confidence that I'm just now stepping into. I was actually writing to a friend yesterday and I said, as somebody who's always been like a mentor to me, and I said, there's times that I've wanted to call you over the last few weeks to ask
Mhm.
you about this decision. Like, what are your thoughts? And I just stopped myself because I already know what you're going to say. You're going to say, trust yourself.
Yeah.
You have a good moral compass. What you think is right is right. So I just hear that now, finally. And it took me 40 years, but finally, I am to the point where I actually believe that I am making good decisions. And so I would say like a level of confidence is finally showing up in my life and getting over imposter syndrome, which has always been something that plagued me. And that's finally dissipating a bit. And I think um, one of the things, even just 2 years ago when I started in my role as the deputy director, I would have people come up to me and say, finally, somebody looks like me in the executive leadership team, finally. And I wasn't in a very confident space then because I was just starting a new job and I was not prepared for people to stop me in the hallway, right? And say, you wear big earrings like me and you have lashes like me and you look like me. And that was just such an unreal and unexpected moment. And with that comes a level of responsibility
Yeah.
that took me probably a real solid year to understand
Mhm.
and to feel like I'm delivering, right? To be able to
Right.
show up
Right.
in
Right.
those
Right.
spaces and continue to elevate voices from throughout the organization, especially Latin or Latinx women. And that's been interesting. That's been the most interesting piece of my, journey as of late.
Mm.
But it's helped my confidence, I think, in the sense that I try, really trying to connect with the community still. And I
Mhm.
do feel like I am making an impact on our executive leadership team, which for the first time ever has, several people of color on it, which is really interesting. So
Amazing. That's amazing.
finally.
And I think you make a good point, right? Is that and I'd be interested from your perspective, and you mentioned this, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into it, but what are the characteristics of your village of support? What are the characteristics?
Oh man, I'm so lucky to have such really good supporters, even people internally that cheer me on. I have a lot of people that don't, trust me. I walk out of like our all staff meetings usually pretty upset, but I have so many people that just reach out that are just generally like, that was a heavy meeting and I see you. And that feels so good. I know, but that's the good side to it. Like, if I need to be the person that it's put front and center and basically as a target on them, fine, because on the back end, I get to learn and grow and make connections with other people who do see me. And that's been really great. But so from internal supporters, amazing, like my small little team, amazing. But also, I have like people who I value as true mentors who have just always had like not only cheered me on, like a real mentor isn't just cheering you on. A real mentor is constantly connecting you to new opportunities, to new people, to like saying, hey, you've got to do this. And that mutual trust that you have for each other, that they're putting you in that place for a reason. And maybe this year it means nothing, but next year it does, right? So that's been like the true mentors in my world. And I have several of those. Usually they're like previous bosses, which is interesting because the relationship never starts off as that, right? They are your boss. And then they turn into like a lifelong friend and mentor. And then, of course, I have like my family sphere, which is incredible. Like my husband and my mom are always there for me and the kids and just
Yeah.
cheering you on. And then my friends who are reminding me that it's okay to travel and live and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
go to happy hour and
Cheer
laugh and
competitions.
yes, yes, exactly. So, and then the kids, like, I have like a whole parents that, know me on a very surface level, but that the enjoyment that we get from each other in just these short periods of time, like, gets you through the week, makes
Yeah.
you look forward to the next event. So that is my social capital is something I value, and I try to tell other people like really invest in that. And
Yeah.
I think there's this piece too of not feeling guilty about it, right? Like
Mm.
building a
Oh my
relationship
gosh.
with the
Yeah.
community, especially as a mom, like, oh, you're gonna go, you're gonna go on another trip or you're gonna go to another dinner or whatever, but I have to because if I don't, I won't show up as a good mom the next week or a good worker, or a good friend or whatever, all of the different roles you play in a week. So,
I equate it, and I don't know if you had this. I definitely had this when with Gianna, right? My first. So I definitely had this, what I call new mom guilt, where you're questioning everything, right? Is this the right food? Is this the right, diapers? Is this right? Like everything is a question because it's all brand new, right? And I call it new mom guilt because for me it was a very difficult space, right? Like I felt like I could not make any decision right. I had no level of confidence, anything. And I would say, fast forward, and once you establish that, like, I got this. Like, thank you for the input. We're not co-parenting, whoever, obviously not my partner, but different folks that wanted to weigh in, you would be like, I got this. And I feel like as you grow in your professional career and as the kids grow in their life, that can creep in at times, right? Like this, like, am I doing it right? And it's almost like a re-questioning.
yeah, yeah, I
And
love
so,
that. That's interesting though, because I think for me, I flipped that around for my first child. So I just, this is terrible, but I named him my tester child because
what an
I knew
absolute
I was going
gem,
to
by
make
the way.
mistakes.
He is
Yes,
my gem.
I knew I was going to make mistakes. So he still is, unfortunately, our tester child. So now it's kind of like a joke, but it's true. Like we're testing things out with you to see how it goes, and we'll make better decisions with the next child. But
Oh my
no,
goodness.
this reminds me of something though that we talk a lot about at work, and this kind of gets back to what I was alluding to earlier too about kind of having a target on you when you're at such a higher executive leadership level. But this idea that leaders have to be perfect. we feel, even in our structure, we have an executive team and a senior team. We feel that even the senior team is really like, but you made a mistake, and like waving fingers at the
Mm,
executive leaders. And we're starting to kind of see that as a trend throughout. And that's concerning because
hmm.
at the end of the day, I am just a human like everybody else, and I'm going to make mistakes. And when I do, I will own them. And so
Right.
being able to start looking at it that way is really start helping us reframe how we move forward as an executive team, because
Yeah.
that is a hard standard to hold. Like this level of perfection that we are holding on to, we have to let it go.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be transformative, which a lot of the agencies I know want to be, that's a
Yeah.
part of it, right?
Yeah.
Being willing to make mistakes and being okay with those mistakes, because again, if you're learning and growing, that's all that really matters. And so
Yeah.
leaning into that part. But
Hmm.
it's been challenging because, gosh, people really do hold this standard that is impossible at
Oh
most
yeah.
steps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I have dear friends, um, Latinas leaders that are like, I can't make a mistake. And they really
Mhm.
hold this super close, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't make a mistake because if I do, not only does it impact me, but it could impact all of the people that I serve. And
Mm.
that's a very unique weight, especially when you lead again with that servant leadership mentality. It isn't just about you. And at the same time, there is a there is a there is a danger in holding it so close, right? Because then you become, as I said, this paralyzation of I can't move, right? I'm always under the microscope. And so it's hard. What One of the things that I'm really interested in, right, is building mission aligned villages. And I think in our I'll kind of equate it back to education. It wasn't until I got into graduate school that I understood the professors worked for me, right? When I was in undergrad, I was like, man, I can't go tell them I don't understand. Geez, they're going to think
Mm.
I'm, not smart. I'm going to end up getting, a bad grade, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until I got into graduate school that I was like, office hours are my one-on-one time with you. Like I will be at your
Mhm.
office hours. If I'm not getting it, that's on you. Like I'm willing to do the work, but if it's still not clicking, we're going to come back until I do get it because I'm paying to get it, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, you know, we can get to this space, but what do we need to normalize in being okay to ask for help or being
Mm.
okay to seek a mentor or being okay to say I need coaching? Like what do you see as the ways we can normalize or what needs to be normalized? To me, I think one of my most pivotal times in my professional career was getting a professional coach. Um,
Um,
and I was like, holy smokes. Like I should have had one of these decades ago, right? I think counseling and therapy, like we're getting into this mental health space that's become more normalized or is becoming more normalized. But professional coaching, mentoring, these spaces that we really come for professional elevation, professional mission alignment. How do we how do we normalize that more and bring in the personal, right? Understanding that there's this like holistic mentality.
yeah. That's super interesting. And I think from taking it back to what you started with, where so many people hold it close to them and they know, like you feel this pressure to perform and deliver and
Mhm.
not make mistakes, right? I want to take it even a step further in that it could impact the next leader. So that's what I think about is if as a Latin woman, if I fail, they'll never hire another Latin woman right into this role or whatever. So that's just the other piece that I think I know I think about or I carry with me as I'm navigating this leadership world. But to your question, how do we ask for help or how do we normalize that? I've really tried to start looking through the lens of equity, because that right there is such an inequitable practice, right? That there's this added pressure that sometimes leaders throughout the organization will put on primarily or sometimes leaders of color, and so then they are helping feed this pressure, if you will. And so but I think yes, hiring an executive coach was a pivotal point in my career for sure.
Mhm.
Well, especially when I was thinking about transition, that was my tipping point. Like I had a formal mentor and an actual employment coach, and totally life changing. So I 100% agree with that. Um, and the other piece to it for me is that not only asking for help, but knowing what to ask for, like really taking time to think about
Mm.
what tools do you need to be successful. And I can use my own experience as an example. When I was asked to step into this very large role as interim executive director of a housing authority, a fairly large housing authority, I was really excited and eager and I wanted to please. And so I just said, yeah, of course, I'm going to do this. And I didn't stop to think, what am I going to need to be successful? What
Yes.
are those expectations of me going to be? Am I going to need admin support? Am I going to need, certain dollars to make new programming happen? Like, I didn't think that part through. And
Mm.
that was a mistake. And that was something that if I could go back and next time this happens to me, I will make sure to put that first and forward is to identify what I need. And I think, especially if you are at a point where you are feeling confident in your decision making and you have people supporting you and behind you, it's be confident in knowing that they will give you what you ask for. And so I think that
Mm.
that's been something that I realized probably 3 or 4 months into the role, that I'm really proud of the work I've done. I brought in $22 million to the organization in just 6 months. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of accomplishments, and it felt really good. I was getting lots of pats on the back, and that was great. And then it was like, but what am I doing? Really, what am I doing? Am I creating an unrealistic expectation for the next leader? Is that happening right now? And I'm afraid that it might be. And so now I'm really mindful. And as we're in the hiring process of a new director, and during their onboarding process, to be able to really talk candidly and openly about that, and having, brave conversations with my leadership to tell them, for the 3 or 4 months, I was literally working 65 hours a week, and
Mm.
that's not okay. And as my leadership team, you should have supported me better. And I should have asked for
Mm.
help too, but I need you to also recognize those moments in your staff, right? And so those conversations are hard to have. And there's such a good learning opportunity because now I'm trying to do that with my own team, like really analyzing their workloads and saying, what can I take off of your plate?
Mm.
What do you need from me? What tools do you need to do your job? Like, as a leader, being able to ask that of your team from the get go so that they're not feeling abandoned or
Mhm.
having those feelings of like, am I doing the right thing? Um, yeah.
That's great. No, that's great. So in our last couple of minutes, one of the things that I hope we can advocate for, right, in this normalization of asking for help is finding coaches that align with where we're going, who we want to be. And so it's not a one size fits all, right? Like you have to have a personality
Mhm.
match, an energy match, a expertise match. Like all of these different things have to match, and it's okay. You might really adore somebody's work, and they're also not the right fit to coach you. And so, what would you use? What criteria would you suggest if you had to say, hey, these are the questions I would ask, or that I ask now to make sure that a coach or a mentor is in alignment with where I'm going?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think for me, it gets down to like, first and foremost, like a respect. Like, we have to have mutual respect for
Mm.
each other. So,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like, I have to respect something about them. So, I'm making sure that that is like clearly identified. And I think the trust building, like, it has to be a
Mhm.
trust building. And I think what was actually really helpful for me is I actually sat down and made a list of all of like my values, like literally my
Mm.
core values, which is like some things that are important to me are time, being heard, um, being efficient, those kinds of things. And so when you're interviewing people for, asking them to be your coach, or even just sometimes I think it could be an organic thing, like over time, you're like, actually you'd be a really great coach for me. Would you be willing to do this? But as that is happening, I think just understanding your value system. So for me, it was like time is the most important thing for me. So if I feel like my time is being wasted, I'm not gonna be happy. Like I only have so many minutes in a day, and it's critical that I'm being productive throughout those times. And so when I feel like my time's being wasted, that's not a good fit. And so if I'm meeting with somebody who is not valuing my time, then that's not a good fit. But the other piece too is listening. Like I have so many people that just want to talk about themselves, and you're just you can't get a word in, or they're not hearing you. Like they'll listen to something you say and then they go off on a tangent and you're like, okay, this is how this is going to go. So I just think understand, like having a clear understanding of your own values and then being able to make connection points. Somebody has to have shared value system or it won't work. It won't be as beneficial for you. You won't progress as quickly, I think, as I look back at those people who stepped into that role for me right from the get go. Like one, I had mad respect for them, and two, there was no doubt we shared a very similar value system.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, and that's really the intent of kind of the series and the interviews, right? Is mission alignment, right? And being okay to say this is not, you are not, this project is not, this job is not mission aligned with my value system, who I am, where I'm going, and it's okay to say no, simply based on it's not mission aligned. And that's a little bit, I think that's kind of like my little nod to stepping into your power, right? Stepping into your
Mhm.
space, is to say it's okay for me to articulate my values and my mission, and if it's aligned, fantastic, and if it's not, it doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means I can't participate in that way, right? And that being an okay screen on how we move forward. So I really appreciate your time, Susanna,
Yeah.
in making sure that that we honor your time. I want to give you just some space to. This is kind of where we would, probably end. Thank you so much for your time, the interview, and I really just want you to have a couple of minutes. If you have a call to action, if you want to talk to your, any of your social media followers, any of your constituents, anything like that. The way that we're going to cut this up is so that you also have a couple of digital assets that you'll be able to post and use on your social media, and that will really just feature you and any messaging that you want to say.
Yeah.
So it's yours.
Thanks, Jamie. I don't know that I have a real strong call to action because sadly I'm so busy. I don't have much time to think, but I will say this. There's a couple of organizations that I support and that are near and dear to my heart. One of them is the CASA program, Boulder Voices for Children. So we are, yes, I'm currently their board president, and I love the work that we do, supporting kids who are going through very difficult situations and having an adult who can really advocate them with no real connection to the justice system or the social services system becomes so important. And we're having our Night of Hope on April 11th, big event. But aside from that, we're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for funds to support Boulder Voices for Children. And then I also serve on another board that's really important too. It's called Thrive. They're based out of Lafayette, and they are an employment education organization. And so they deliver trainings to people who are looking to transition in their career, who
Okay.
maybe want to go from an entry level position to a higher level position, or are just new to the workforce or moving places. And they serve anybody in the country, and they do a deep dive into employment services. And every person is then paired with a coach through this vast network that they have. So, such a great organization, and they're again Thrive. So.
Excellent. Okay, so where would we find information about the event on April 11th? Where should we go find that?
Yeah, so Boulder Voices for Children has a website. I can find it for you really quick.
I'll check in on the links with you. But thank you. Genuinely, thank you for your time. I always have such good conversations with you when we get to in the limited times that we get together. But we're
Right.
gonna we're gonna make more times because we found our spot now.
We did. Well, thank you, Jamie. This was so important. It's so great to reflect on just things that are happening in the world and connecting them to our personal life and really feeling like all of the chaos that's happening around us, it's for a reason and there's meaning behind it, even when we bring it down to our level. So thank you. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right.